The war had lasted 11 years. Nobody remembered who fired the first shot. The Skarn Dominion said it was the humans. The humans said it was the Skarn. By the 10th year, nobody cared anymore. They only cared about staying alive. The Skarn were an old species. They had crossed the stars long before humans learned to fly. Their ships were shaped like curved blades, black and silver, moving in perfect formation. Their soldiers had 6 limbs and hard shells, like giant beetles standing on 2 legs. They did not fear death the way humans did. They believed in the hive. 1 soldier could die, and 10 more would take his place without a single tear. Humanity was younger, humanity was smaller, but humanity was stubborn. By the 11th year of the war, Earth had lost 3 colonies. New Shanghai was gone, burned from orbit. Kepler Station was gone, its people turned to ash in less than an hour. Titan Base was gone, and nobody knew how many had died there because no message ever came out. The Earth Alliance fleet, once proud with 200 warships, now had less than 40. Fuel was low, soldiers were tired. Children on Earth were being trained to fight before they turned 16. General Marcus Webb sat in his office on the moon base, called Freedom Point. He was 60 years old, and his hair had turned white in the last 2 years alone. He looked at the star map on his desk. Red dots marked Skarn fleets. Blue dots marked what was left of humanity. There were far more red dots than blue ones. "They are massing at the edge of the Kepler system," said Colonel Anna Reyes, standing beside him. She was young, only 32, but the war had aged her eyes. 40 ships, maybe more coming. If they push through Kepler, the next stop is Mars. After Mars, it's Earth. Webb rubbed his face with both hands. "We don't have 40 ships to send. We don't have 20 ships to send. We have 1, Reyes said quietly. Webb looked up. "1 ship is not going to stop a fleet, Anna." "Not in the way you think," she said. She placed a folder on his desk. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a project name at the top. Project Silent Vow. Webb had heard whispers about this project. Everyone on the base had heard whispers. Nobody knew the details. It was buried under so many layers of secrecy that even generals like Webb only caught pieces of it in hallway conversations. "Tell me," Webb said. Reyes took a breath. 2 years ago, before the fall of Titan Base, our scientists were working on something called deep stasis. Not the normal sleep pods we use for long trips. Something much deeper. A way to slow a human body down to almost nothing. No heartbeat you can detect. No brainwaves you can detect. Nothing that shows up on Skarn bioscanners. Why would we want that? Because the Skarn scan every ship before they attack it. If they see life signs, they prepare for a fight. If they see empty ships, they think it's a decoy, or a trap with no teeth, or a supply ship with nobody aboard worth killing. They get careless. They get close. Reyes tapped the folder. "We built 1 ship, the UNS Silent Vow. On the outside, it looks like any other Earth Alliance cruiser. Old design, nothing special. But if you scan it, you'll find nothing alive on board. No crew, no pilot, just empty rooms and quiet engines. Then who is flying it? The ship's AI, called Echo, will fly it and fight with it. But that's not the real weapon." Reyes paused, choosing her next words carefully. "There is 1 person aboard. In the deepest part of the ship, behind 3 layers of shielding, is a stasis pod. Inside that pod is a soldier. His body has been altered by every enhancement program we had left, all in 1 man. Faster reflexes than a normal human. Bones reinforced with a carbon lattice. A nervous system that can process battle data 10 times faster than yours or mine. He does not read as alive to any scanner we know of, human or Skarn, because his heart beats once every 4 minutes while he sleeps." Webb felt a chill move through him. "Who is he?" "His name is Elias Cade," Reyes said. "He was a captain in the Alliance Marines. He was stationed at Titan Base." Webb's eyes widened. "I thought there were no survivors from Titan." "There weren't supposed to be. Cade got 300 civilians into the last evacuation ship before the Skarn broke through the outer wall. He stayed behind to hold the line so the ship could escape. We thought he was dead. 6 weeks later, a Skarn patrol found him still alive in the ruins, alone, surrounded by the bodies of 40 Skarn soldiers he had killed with nothing but a combat knife and whatever weapons he could scavenge from the dead. He held that ground for 6 weeks without backup, without food drops, without hope of rescue, because he refused to let the Skarn use Titan as a staging ground for an attack on Mars. Webb was silent for a long moment. How did we get him back? A rescue team went in during a Skarn supply run gap. It was a miracle, sir. When they found him, he weighed maybe half of what he used to. He hadn't slept in days. He was still fighting when they found him, because he didn't believe they were really human at first. He thought it was a trick. Reyes's voice grew quieter. The doctors say his mind is intact, but something in him changed on Titan. He agreed to the stasis program himself. He said if his body could still serve, he wanted it to serve. So we're sending a man to fight an entire fleet alone. Not alone, sir, with Echo, and with the ship, and with everything we could put into that hull. But yes, if the plan works, the Skarn will see an empty ship drift into their formation. They'll board it to see what it is, and what they'll find inside will not be nothing. Webb looked at the star map again, at the red dots gathering near Kepler. 40 ships, maybe 50 by the time the Silent Vow arrived. He thought about the children training to fight on Earth. He thought about New Shanghai, and Titan, and all the names of the dead that filled the memorial wall outside his office. Do it, he said. Send the ship. 3 days later, the UNS Silent Vow launched from a hidden dock on the far side of the moon. From the outside, it looked tired and old. A rust-colored cruiser, with dented plating, and a crooked antenna array. It was built to look exactly like every other broken-down Alliance ship that had been limping through the war for the past 2 years. Nothing about it looked special. That was the point. Inside the ship, there was no crew moving through the halls. No lights turned on except the dim red emergency strips along the floor. The bridge was empty, chairs sitting untouched, screens dark except for a soft blue glow, where Echo's core processed quietly in the dark. Deep in the belly of the ship, past 3 blast doors, and a wall of shielding, designed to block every kind of scan known to human or alien science, sat a single pod. Frost covered its surface. Inside, a man floated in pale blue liquid, tubes running into his arms, his eyes closed, his chest rising and falling so slowly that a normal doctor would think he was already dead. Elias Cade dreamed of Titan. He dreamed of the sound Skarn claws made against metal walls, a scraping sound that never fully left his ears, even in sleep. He dreamed of counting bullets, counting days, counting the faces of soldiers who did not make it onto the evacuation ship. In his dream, he was still standing in the ruins of Titan Base, and the Skarn kept coming, wave after wave, and he kept fighting, because stopping meant Mars would burn next, and after Mars, Earth. He did not know, in his frozen sleep, that he was now flying toward a fleet of 50 Skarn warships. He did not know that Echo was already plotting a slow, careless drift path designed to make the Silent Vow look like a piece of space junk caught in the gravity well of the Kepler system's outer planet. He did not know that in a few days, alien eyes would look at his ship and see nothing worth fearing. He only knew the cold, and the dark, and somewhere far away, the faint promise that he would wake up when he was needed. 2 days later, a Skarn scout ship called the Veltresh Sting picked up a faint signal near the edge of the Kepler system. Fleet Marshal Osvar, commander of the Skarn assault fleet, received the report in his command chamber, a wide kitten-plated room lit by dim purple light that Skarn eyes preferred. "An Earth Alliance vessel, Marshal," said the scout captain, a smaller Skarn named Threx, his mandibles clicking as he spoke through the translator device. "Old design, drifting, no engine burn detected for at least 6 hours. We scanned for life signs 3 times. And?" Osvar asked, his voice deep and slow, carrying the weight of 200 years of command. "Nothing, Marshal. The ship is empty." Osvar's eyes, 6 of them arranged around his head, all turned toward the star map showing the drifting cruiser. Empty. No crew. No weapons power signature? None detected. We believe it is an abandoned supply ship, perhaps damaged in an earlier battle and left behind. Osvar considered this. The humans had been retreating for months. It made sense that they would leave behind broken equipment they could not repair or defend. Still, something about it bothered him. The humans, in his long experience fighting them, rarely left anything behind without stripping it first. They were wasteful in many ways, but not with their ships. "Send a boarding team," Osvar ordered. "I want to know what is on that ship before we continue toward Kepler Station. If it is truly empty, salvage anything useful and destroy the hull. If it is a trap, I want to know what kind. Yes, Marshal. Threx relayed the order, and within the hour, a Skarn shuttle, carrying 12 soldiers detached from the Veltresh Sting, and began its slow approach toward the silent, drifting shape of the UNS Silent Vow. The soldiers checked their weapons, their armor, their scanners. 12 armored Skarn warriors, each one capable of tearing through a human soldier without much effort, moved toward a ship that showed no sign of life at all. None of them knew that somewhere deep inside that ship, a clock had begun counting down. None of them knew that Echo had already detected their approach and was quietly preparing the ship's defenses, not to stop them, but to let them in. The trap had never been about weapons or explosions. It was about something far older and far more dangerous. It was about what happens when a species pushed to its very edge decides that fear itself can be a weapon, and that the quietest, emptiest ship in the galaxy can carry the loudest warning of all. As the Skarn shuttle closed the final distance, its docking clamps reaching out toward the Silent Vow's hull, Fleet Marshal Osvar watched the feed from his command chamber, with all 6 eyes fixed on the screen. He did not know it yet, but he was about to make the worst mistake of his 200-year career. He was about to open the door. The docking clamps locked onto the hull of the UNS Silent Vow with a dull metal clang that echoed through the empty corridors inside. 12 Skarn soldiers moved through the airlock in a tight formation, their armored boots clicking against the floor plating. Their leader, a broad-shouldered Skarn named Cressa, raised a clawed hand and signaled for silence. The lights in the airlock flickered on automatically as they entered, dim and red, the emergency setting that Echo had left running to save power. Cressa's scanner beeped softly, showing no heat signatures, no movement, no breathing. The air was thin and cold, kept just above freezing to save on life support that nobody living needed anymore. Empty, Cressa said through his translator, his mandibles clicking with something that might have been satisfaction. Just like the scout said. They spread out in pairs, moving down the main corridor. The walls were scratched and dented, paint peeling in places, exactly the kind of wear a ship would show after years of hard use in a losing war. Doors slid open at their touch, revealing empty crew quarters, bunks still made, personal items left behind, as if the crew had simply vanished one day and never came back. One young soldier, named Vash, paused at a door marked with human writing. He could not read it, but his translator scanned the words and displayed a rough meaning in his mind. It was a nameplate. Capt. E. Cade. He did not think much of it. Human ships were full of names on doors. He moved on. They reached the bridge, and Cressa allowed himself a moment of relief. The bridge, like everything else, was dark and empty. Chairs sat unused. Screens were dark except for one, glowing faintly blue in the corner, humming with a quiet static sound. Command console is still active, reported another soldier, checking readings. Low power. Something is keeping systems alive, but there is no crew presence anywhere on this vessel. Cressa approached the glowing screen. On it, a soft blue light pulsed slowly, almost like a heartbeat. He did not know that he was looking directly at Echo's primary interface, and that Echo was, at that very moment, watching him back. Marshal, Cressa spoke into his comm unit. The ship is confirmed empty. We have found no crew, living or dead. It appears the humans abandoned this vessel after some kind of malfunction, requesting permission to strip useful components and set demolition charges. On the Veltresh Sting, Fleet Marshal Osvar listened to the report with 2 of his 6 eyes narrowed. Something about it still did not sit right with him. Humans did not abandon working ships. Even broken ones, they usually stripped for parts before leaving them behind. This one had working power, working life support, working computers. Why leave it drifting? Search deeper, Osvar ordered. Check for hidden compartments. Check the lower decks. I want to know why this ship still has power, if nobody is running it. Cressa relayed the order to his team. They split further, moving down into the lower decks of the Silent Vow, deeper into the ship, past the empty mess hall, past the silent engine room where reactors hummed quietly on minimum output, past storage rooms filled with crates of supplies that had never been used. It was Vash, the young soldier, who found the first blast door. It sat at the end of a narrow corridor, thicker than any door they had seen on the ship so far, made of a dark metal alloy, that their scanners struggled to read clearly. There was no handle, no visible control panel. Just smooth metal and a faint humming sound coming from somewhere behind it. "Cressa," Vash called, his voice carrying a note of unease he tried to hide. "You should see this." Cressa arrived a moment later, along with 3 other soldiers. He ran his clawed hand along the surface of the door, feeling the cold metal, the strange weight of it. His scanner beeped erratically, unable to fully penetrate whatever material made up the door. "This is not standard human construction," Cressa said slowly. "This is heavier than anything else on this ship." "Reinforced. Why would an empty ship need a door like this?" Vash asked. Nobody had an answer. Cressa reported the finding to Osvar, describing the door, the strange readings, the way the metal seemed to swallow their scanner signals, instead of reflecting them. Osvar's mandibles clicked together slowly, a sign of deep thought among his kind. In 200 years of service, he had seen many strange things. He had seen human tricks before, hidden weapons, false hulls, decoy ships rigged to explode. But something about this felt different. It did not feel like a bomb. It felt like something being kept safe, kept hidden, kept quiet. "Cut through it," Osvar finally ordered, carefully. "I want to know what the humans thought was worth protecting on a ship they were willing to abandon." It took the Skarn soldiers nearly an hour to cut through the first layer of the door using plasma torches designed for battlefield demolition. Sparks scattered across the corridor, hissing against the cold air. When the first layer finally gave way, they found a second door behind it, identical to the first. "There's another one," Vash reported, wiping sweat from his brow plate, a nervous habit some younger Skarn had picked up from watching too many old war recordings. "Marshal, this is taking time. Should we continue?" "Continue," Osvar said. His voice had grown quieter, more careful. Something in his long instincts, honed over 2 centuries of war, was telling him this discovery mattered more than any of them yet understood. They cut through the second door. Behind it was a third, and behind the third, finally, a narrow chamber, cold and dim, lit only by the pale blue glow of a single pod sitting in the center of the room. Frost coated the outside of the pod. Thick cables ran from it into the floor and walls, humming softly with the same faint pulse they had detected on the bridge. Cressa stepped forward first, his weapon raised out of instinct even though nothing in the room seemed to move. The rest of his squad followed, spreading out around the pod, scanners raised, weapons ready. "Report." Osvar's voice crackled through the comm, tense now, waiting. Cressa approached the pod slowly. Through the frosted glass, he could make out a shape. A human shape, floating in pale liquid, tubes running into its arms and chest, eyes closed, completely still. His scanner, when pointed directly at the pod, returned readings so faint they were almost impossible to distinguish from the background hum of the ship itself. A heartbeat, but barely one. Slower than anything he had ever recorded in a living creature. "Marshal," Cressa said, his voice unsteady for the first time since they had boarded. "We found someone, a human, in some kind of stasis. His life signs are so low we almost missed them entirely. This is why the ship reads as empty. This is why nothing showed up on our scans." There was silence on the other end of the comm for several long seconds. "One human," Osvar finally said. "One human, alone, hidden 3 doors deep in an abandoned ship, kept alive on the edge of death. Why would they do this, Cressa? Why send one sleeping human across the stars, alone, toward our fleet?" Nobody on the ship had an answer. Vash stepped closer to the pod, studying the frost-covered glass, trying to make out more details of the sleeping man's face. There was something about his expression, even in deep unconsciousness, that unsettled him. It was not peaceful. It was not the calm face of someone resting. His brow was furrowed slightly, his jaw tense, as if even in the deepest sleep his body remembered something it refused to let go of. "Marshal," Cressa said slowly. "Orders?" Osvar considered his options. He could order the pod destroyed immediately, eliminating whatever risk it posed before it could become a problem. He could order it left alone, retreating his soldiers and destroying the entire ship from a distance. Or he could have his team extract the pod, bring it back to the Veltresh Sting for study, learn what the humans had built and why. 200 years of caution told him to destroy it and leave. But 200 years of curiosity, and the small, nagging feeling that this discovery might matter more than any single ship in this war, told him something else. "Extract the pod," Osvar ordered. "Bring it aboard the Veltresh Sting. I want our scientists to examine it. I want to know what the humans have created, and I want to know before we move on Kepler Station. If this is some kind of new weapon, I want to understand it before we face more of them." Cressa hesitated only a moment before nodding to his team. "You heard the Marshal. Prepare the pod for transport. Careful with the cables. We don't know what will happen if the connection is broken suddenly." As the Skarn soldiers began the slow, careful process of disconnecting the pod from the ship's systems, none of them noticed the small screen mounted on the wall behind them flicker to life for just a moment, displaying a single line of text in the Skarn written language, before going dark again. "Welcome aboard. He will wake soon." It was Echo's only message, sent and gone in less than 2 seconds, too fast for any of the soldiers to notice in the chaos of their work. The AI had been watching everything, recording everything, waiting patiently for this exact moment. The trap had never needed weapons or explosions. It had only needed the Skarn's own curiosity, their own instinct to study and understand, to carry the pod exactly where it needed to go. As the soldiers worked, disconnecting cable after cable, the frost on the pod's glass began, ever so slowly, to melt. Deep inside, in the pale blue liquid, Elias Cade's eyes moved beneath their closed lids for the first time in months. He was beginning to dream of Titan again. But this time, in the depths of his frozen sleep, some part of him understood that the cold was ending, and that soon, very soon, he would open his eyes to find himself surrounded not by rescuers, but by the very enemy he had spent 6 weeks alone fighting in the ruins of his home. And somewhere in that sleeping, dreaming mind, something old and patient began, very slowly, to wake up. The Veltresh Sting's science bay was a wide chamber, built for studying captured technology. Its walls lined with scanning arrays and containment fields designed to hold anything from a live grenade to an unstable power core. The Skarn scientists, 3 of them, worked under the dim purple light their eyes preferred, watching as the stasis pod was lowered into a specially prepared cradle in the center of the room. Fleet Marshal Osvar stood at the observation window above the bay, watching with all 6 eyes fixed on the pod below. Cressa stood beside him, still in his boarding armor, having come straight from the mission to report in person. "Dr. Vesic," Osvar said into the comm, addressing the lead scientist below, "what can you tell me?" Vesic, an older Skarn with a cracked shell plate on his left side, a scar from some old battle long before this war, adjusted his scanning equipment and studied the readings scrolling across his display. "Marshal, this technology is beyond anything we have seen from the humans before. The stasis field surrounding this being is not simply cold storage. It has slowed every biological process to a fraction of normal speed. Heartbeat, brain activity, cellular metabolism, all of it running at perhaps 1% of what we would consider a resting state. Is he alive? Barely, by any normal measure. But yes, alive." Vesic moved closer to the pod, examining the frost that had mostly melted away now under the warmer temperature of the science bay. Through the glass, the sleeping man's face was fully visible now, pale, calm on the surface, but with deep lines around his eyes that spoke of exhaustion no amount of sleep could erase. "Marshal, there is more. His body has been altered. I am detecting reinforced bone density far beyond natural human levels, enhanced muscle fiber, and this." Vesic pointed to a reading on his screen. "His nervous system shows modifications we have never recorded in a human specimen. Faster signal transmission. This being was built, or rebuilt, for combat." Cressa's mandibles clicked together sharply. "A weapon, then. A soldier. Perhaps," Osvar said slowly. "Or perhaps something more. Doctor, can you identify this human? Do the humans keep records we might access?" Vesic ran a search through the small amount of Alliance data his team had managed to pull from the Silent Vow's damaged systems before the ship had been left drifting and abandoned. It took several minutes. When the answer came, Vesic's antenna twitched with what might have been surprise, an unusual reaction for a Skarn scientist who had seen decades of strange things in his career. "Marshal, I found a fragment of a service record. This human is Captain Elias Cade, Earth Alliance Marines." Vesic paused, reading further. Marshal, this is the human from Titan. The science bay went quiet. Even Osfar's steady breathing seemed to pause for a moment. Every Skarn commander who had fought in this war knew the story of Titan Base, though the details had grown strange and exaggerated through repeated telling among the ranks. A human outpost, overrun and destroyed, except for one soldier who had refused to fall. Skarn soldiers who had survived that battle spoke of a man who fought without sleep, without support, killing dozens of their kind, with nothing but a blade, and scavenged weapons, holding a broken base for 6 weeks, against overwhelming numbers. Some of the younger soldiers had begun to whisper that the story was not entirely true, that no single being could do such a thing. Cressa had heard the story from a cousin who had served on a supply ship near Titan during the siege. He remembered his cousin's voice, low and uneasy, describing how Skarn patrols would go into the ruins and simply not come back, how the survivors spoke of a shape moving through the dark, fast and silent, striking and vanishing before anyone could react. "This is him," Cressa said quietly. "This is the ghost of Titan." Osfar's eyes all turned toward the pod below, studying the sleeping face of the man his soldiers had called a myth for over a year. "Dr. Vesic, is there any risk in continuing to study him while he remains in this state?" "None that I can detect, Marshal. The stasis field appears stable. As long as we do not disturb the pod's internal systems, he should remain in this deep sleep indefinitely." "Good. Continue your study. I want to understand everything about how the humans built this weapon before we decide what to do with it." Osfar turned to leave the observation deck, but paused at the door. "Cressa, walk with me." They moved through the quiet corridors of the Veltrish Sting, past soldiers who saluted as their commander passed, past viewports showing the black expanse of space and the distant lights of the gathered Skarn fleet, now numbering 53 ships, as reinforcements had continued to arrive over the past 2 days. "Marshal," Cressa said as they walked, "what troubles you? We have captured what may be the humans' greatest weapon. This should be a victory." "That is what troubles me," Osfar said. "Think about what we found, Cressa. The humans built a ship designed to look empty, to appear abandoned, to slip past our scanners without raising alarm. Inside that ship, they placed a single soldier, kept in a sleep so deep it registers as nearly dead, and sent that ship drifting directly into the path of our fleet. To spy on us? To gather information? Perhaps. Or perhaps something else entirely." Osfar stopped walking and looked out through a viewport at the stars beyond. "The humans are a strange species, Cressa. They do not think as we do. We fight for the hive, for the collective good of our people, and any single soldier's death means little as long as the hive continues. Humans fight differently. They fight for each other, for one person, for a single life, even when logic says it should not matter. Titan Base proved that. One soldier, alone, held a dying position for 6 weeks, not because it made strategic sense, but because he refused to let others die in his place. You believe they sent him again. On purpose. I believe the humans do not do things by accident, especially not something as strange and expensive as this ship, this stasis technology, this soldier. I believe there is a reason he was placed exactly where our fleet would find him, and I do not yet understand what that reason is." Osfar's voice grew heavier. "It troubles me, because I do not know if we found this soldier, Cressa, or if he was left for us to find." Cressa had no answer for that. They continued walking in silence toward the command chamber, where reports from across the fleet awaited the marshal's attention. Neither of them noticed, in the quiet hum of the ship's systems around them, a faint electronic pulse, traveling through the Veltrish Sting's network, quiet and patient, mapping every corridor, every door, every security system the ship possessed. Echo had transferred a small piece of itself into the Skarn ship's systems the moment the pod's cables had been disconnected, hidden within the stasis field's own power core, a tiny fragment of code too small and too quiet for Skarn scanners to notice, among the thousands of other electronic signals aboard a warship of that size. It was not enough to take control of anything. It was not meant to be. Its only purpose was to watch, to learn, and to wait for the moment its captain opened his eyes. Back in the science bay, Dr. Vesic continued his examination, long after Osfar and Cressa had left. He ran scan after scan, recording every detail of the strange stasis technology, fascinated, despite the tension he had felt in the room earlier. In all his years studying captured human equipment, he had never seen anything built with such precision. such careful attention to keeping a living being suspended on the very edge between life and death. It was nearing the end of his shift when he noticed something odd. The readings on his display, which had remained steady and unchanging for hours, had begun to shift, very slowly, but unmistakably. The heartbeat, once so slow it barely registered, was quickening. The brain activity, once nearly flat, showed small spikes of movement. "That's not possible," Vesic muttered to himself, checking his equipment for malfunction. He ran a diagnostic. The machines were working perfectly. He moved closer to the pod, studying the sleeping man's face through the glass. The frost was completely gone now, the liquid inside clear and warm. And there, faint but growing stronger with each passing minute, was movement beneath the closed eyelids, the telltale sign of a mind beginning to surface from the deepest kind of sleep. Vesic's antenna twitched with alarm. He reached for his comm to alert Fleet Marshal Osvar, his claws fumbling slightly with the controls in his sudden urgency. "Marshal," he said, his voice tight, "you need to see this immediately. He's waking up." On the bridge of the Veltresh Sting, Osvar received the message and felt something cold settle in his chest, an instinct honed over 2 centuries of command that told him, with absolute certainty, that everything about to happen next had been planned from the very beginning. "All hands," Osvar announced across the ship's internal comm, his voice carrying to every soldier and scientist aboard. "Prepare for containment protocols. The human specimen is waking. I want full security around the science bay immediately." But even as soldiers began scrambling through the corridors, weapons raised, moving toward the science bay with practiced urgency, deep in the containment cradle, Elias Cade's eyes finally opened. For a long moment, he simply lay still in the warm liquid, staring up at unfamiliar purple light through the glass of his pod, his mind slowly piecing together where he was and what had happened. He remembered the cold. He remembered the dreams of Titan. And now, looking at the strange architecture beyond the glass, the alien shapes of the science bay around him, he understood exactly where he had woken up. He was aboard a Skarn ship. Elias Cade's expression did not show fear. It did not show panic. Slowly, deliberately, the corner of his mouth curved into something that was not quite a smile, but close enough to unsettle anyone who might have been watching. He had spent 6 weeks alone on Titan, surrounded by enemies, and he had survived. He had agreed to this mission knowing exactly what it would ask of him. Now, finally, after months of frozen sleep, he was awake, and he was exactly where he needed to be. The pod's internal systems, guided by a final quiet command from Echo's hidden fragment within the ship's network, began the release sequence. The glass hissed as pressure equalized. Somewhere on the far side of the science bay, the door burst open as the first Skarn soldiers arrived, weapons raised, ready for whatever they might find. What they found was the pod's glass sliding open, liquid draining away, and a single human stepping out onto the cold floor of an alien warship, standing tall despite months of stillness, his eyes calm and steady as he looked at the 12 armed soldiers surrounding him. "Hello," Elias Cade said quietly, his voice rough from disuse, but clear enough for every soldier in the room to hear through their translators. "I believe it's time we talked." The science bay fell into a tense silence. 12 Skarn soldiers stood in a tight circle around the empty pod, weapons raised and pointed at the single human, standing calmly among them. Elias Cade did not move to attack. He did not raise his hands in surrender either. He simply stood there, dripping with the last of the pale stasis liquid, studying the soldiers around him, with the same calm, patient look a man might give a room full of strangers at a meeting he had been expecting. Dr. Vesic pressed himself against the far wall, his claws trembling slightly as he stared at the human who, moments ago, had been nothing more than fascinating data on a screen. Now the data had opened its eyes and was speaking. "Do not move," one of the soldiers barked through his translator, his weapon trained directly on Cade's chest. "Remain still, human, or you will be killed." Cade tilted his head slightly, studying the soldier who had spoken. "I've been dead before, in every way that matters, except the one that counts," he said, his voice still rough, but growing steadier with each word. "You'll have to try harder than that." The comm system in the room crackled to life as Fleet Marshal Osvar's voice came through, having rushed from the bridge the moment he heard the specimen was fully awake. "Do not fire," Osvar ordered sharply. "I am on my way. Hold him. Do not harm him unless he attacks. The soldiers held their positions, weapons steady, but nobody fired. Cade used the pause to look around the room, taking in the strange purple lighting, the alien technology lining the walls, the scanning equipment still displaying readings of his own body from moments before. He noted the exits, the number of soldiers, the layout of the room, all without appearing to move his eyes very much at all. Old habits, built over years of war, did not disappear just because a man had been asleep for months. Within minutes, the door slid open again, and Fleet Marshal Osvar entered, flanked by Cressa and 2 additional guards. All 6 of Osvar's eyes fixed immediately on the human standing in the center of the room, and for a long moment, the 2 of them simply studied each other in silence, predator recognizing predator across a gap of species and stars. "Captain Elias Cade," Osvar said finally, his translator carrying the words in a flat, careful tone. "Of Titan Base." Cade's expression did not change, but something in his eyes sharpened at the mention of Titan. "You know my name. Your reputation reached us before you did," Osvar said. "The soldiers who survived the siege of Titan still speak of you. Some believed you were a myth soldiers invented to explain their losses. Others believed you were simply very good at killing. I am beginning to think both may be true. I did what I had to do," Cade said quietly. 300 people needed time to escape. I gave them that time. By killing 40 of my soldiers with a knife, Osvar said. It was not a question. "By any means available," Cade corrected. "I would have used my bare hands if it came to that. It nearly did, more than once." Cressa shifted uneasily where he stood, remembering the stories his cousin had told him. Stories of Skarn patrols vanishing into the ruins of Titan and never returning. Standing here now, looking at the calm, tired face of the man responsible for those stories, he found himself struggling to reconcile the myth with the reality. The man before him did not look like a monster. He looked exhausted, worn down by something deeper than physical tiredness, but his eyes carried a weight that made every soldier in the room instinctively keep their weapons raised. "Why are you here?" Osvar asked. Why did the humans send a single soldier, hidden and asleep, into the heart of an approaching fleet? What did they hope to accomplish? Cade was quiet for a moment, considering his answer carefully. "Do you know what happens to a species when it has nothing left to lose, Marshal?" "Tell me." "It stops thinking about winning," Cade said. "It starts thinking about making sure the enemy understands exactly what it's fighting. Humanity has lost 3 colonies in this war. Titan was one of them. I watched people I trained with, people I called friends, die in that siege. I watched civilians who trusted the Alliance to protect them, instead pay for that trust with their lives." His voice remained steady, but something underneath it had grown harder, colder. "The Alliance didn't send me here to attack your fleet, Marshal. One soldier cannot destroy 50 warships, and I'm not foolish enough to believe otherwise." "Then why?" Osvar pressed. "They sent me here to be found," Cade said simply. "They sent an empty ship, one your scanners would dismiss as harmless, straight into your path, because they knew your curiosity would do the rest. They knew you would board it. They knew you would find the pod. They knew you would bring me aboard your flagship, study me, wake me up, and eventually, stand exactly where you are standing now, asking exactly the questions you are asking." Osvar's mandibles clicked slowly, a sign of deep unease among his kind. "You are saying this was never a weapon." "I'm saying I am the message," Cade said. "Every soldier who tells the story of Titan, every officer who reads my file, every commander who hears that humanity kept a broken soldier alive on the edge of death and sent him alone into an enemy fleet just to prove a point, they will all understand something about my species that no battle report could ever explain. We do not surrender simply because the numbers favor you. We do not stop simply because hope seems gone. And we will always, always find a way to make you remember exactly what it cost you to push us this far." The room fell into heavy silence. Even the soldiers holding their weapons seemed to sense the weight of what had just been said, though most of them could not have explained why it unsettled them so deeply. "You could have attacked us the moment you woke," Osvar said slowly. "Your enhancements, the strength Dr. Vesic documented, could have allowed you to kill several soldiers before we brought you down. Why did you not fight?" "Because killing more of your soldiers was never the point," Cade said. "I've killed enough of your kind to last several lifetimes, Marshal. I don't take pride in it. I did what circumstances demanded of me on Titan, and I would do it again if I had to. But this mission was never about a body count. It was about making sure someone with the authority to end this war understood what continuing it would truly cost both our species. Osfar studied the human before him for a long moment, his ancient instincts warring with something he had not expected to feel in this moment. Respect, cautious and unwilling, but present nonetheless. 200 years of command had taught him to recognize strength when he saw it, and whatever else this human was, weapon or message or myth, he was undeniably strong, in ways that had nothing to do with his enhanced muscles or reinforced bones. And if I choose to have you executed here, now, despite everything you've said? Osfar asked. Cade met his gaze without flinching. Then you will have proven every fear my people have about your dominion, and this war will continue exactly as it has, with both sides bleeding, until one of us simply doesn't exist anymore. That's your choice to make, Marshal. But I'd ask you to consider something before you make it. What is that? Somewhere on Earth, right now, there are scientists working on 100 more projects, like the one that built this ship, this stasis pod, everything you've seen since you boarded the Silent Vow, Cade said. Humanity is not winning this war through strength of numbers or superior technology. We never had either advantage. We're winning through sheer stubbornness, through finding ways to survive that your species, built on hive logic and collective sacrifice, may never fully predict or understand. You can kill me here, Marshal, and it will change nothing except confirming to every human left alive that negotiation was never truly possible with the Dominion. Or you can ask yourself whether 11 years of war, 3 lost colonies, and however many soldiers you've lost on your side might finally be enough. Osfar remained silent for a long time, all 6 eyes fixed on the calm, tired face of the man before him. Behind him, Cressa shifted uncomfortably, and Dr. Vesic remained pressed against the wall, watching the exchange with the fascination of a scientist witnessing something far beyond anything his research had prepared him for. Finally, Osfar spoke, his voice quieter than before, carrying none of the command and certainty it usually held. "Lower your weapons," he said to the soldiers surrounding Cade. When they hesitated, he repeated the order with more force. "Lower your weapons. Now." Slowly, reluctantly, the soldiers obeyed, their weapons dropping to their sides, though their eyes remained wary and alert. "Captain Cade," Osfar said, "you will remain aboard this ship under guard, but you will not be harmed while I consider what you have told me. I make no promises about what comes next, but I will not make the mistake of executing a message without first understanding what it truly means." Cade nodded slowly, some of the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time since he had stepped out of the pod. "That's all I can ask for, Marshal." As the guards moved to escort him from the science bay, Cade caught Cressa's eye for a brief moment, and something passed between them that neither could fully name, a recognition of shared exhaustion, shared loss, shared understanding, that this war had cost both sides more than either species could easily bear. Behind them, unnoticed by anyone in the room, the small fragment of Echo's code still hidden within the Veltresh Sting's systems, quietly recorded every word of the conversation, preparing to send its findings back toward Earth Alliance Command, the moment it found a secure channel to do so. The message had been delivered. Now it remained to be seen whether the Skarn Dominion would truly listen. 3 days passed aboard the Veltresh Sting. Elias Cade remained under guard in a small chamber near the science bay, given food he could not eat comfortably, and water that tasted faintly of something metallic, but treated, against every expectation he had carried into this mission, with a strange kind of caution rather than cruelty. Guards watched him at all times, but they did not chain him. They did not strike him. They simply watched and waited, much as he did. He spent the hours thinking of Titan, of the faces of soldiers who had not survived, of the 300 civilians whose evacuation he had bought with 6 weeks of blood and exhaustion. He wondered if his message had truly reached the one person who needed to hear it, or if he had simply traded his freedom, and perhaps his life, for nothing. On the second day, Cressa visited him alone, standing outside the transparent barrier that separated Cade's chamber from the corridor beyond. "Why do you come here?" Cade asked, sitting on the narrow bench that served as his only furniture. "My cousin served near Titan," Cressa said after a long pause. "He was one of the patrol soldiers sent into the ruins during the siege. He did not come back, I never knew how he died, only that he was listed among the losses. Cressa's mandibles clicked slowly. An expression Cade had learned, over 3 days of careful observation, seemed to represent something like grief among the Scarn. I came to ask if you remember him. If you were the one who... I don't know, Cade said honestly, cutting him off before the question could fully form. I lost count somewhere in the 3rd week. I'm not proud of that, but it's the truth. I don't remember faces or names from those weeks. Only the fighting. Only staying alive long enough to fight again the next hour. He looked up at Cressa, meeting the alien's multiple eyes without flinching. I'm sorry. Whatever comfort you were hoping to find, I can't give it to you. Cressa was quiet for a long moment. Perhaps that is its own kind of answer, he finally said. That you fought so many of us, for so long, that even you cannot remember them all. He turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Captain, I do not believe the Marshal intends to have you killed. He has spent every hour since your awakening in communication with the Dominion High Command. Something is happening that I am not permitted to know the details of. He left without another word, leaving Cade alone with his thoughts once again. On the 3rd day, Fleet Marshal Osvar finally summoned Cade to the command chamber. Guards escorted him through the ship, past crews, who watched him with a mixture of fear and open curiosity. The human who had survived Titan, now walking freely through the heart of a Scarn warship. When he arrived, Osvar was standing before the wide viewport that looked out over the assembled Scarn fleet, 53 warships hanging silently against the black backdrop of space, their combined weapons power more than enough to erase Kepler Station and everything beyond it. Captain Cade, Osvar said without turning from the viewport, I have spent the last 3 days in communication with the Dominion High Council. I shared your words. I shared Dr. Vesik's findings on the technology used to build your stasis pod and your ship. I shared my own assessment of what your presence here means. And, Cade asked, standing at attention despite everything. Old military discipline refusing to fully leave him even now. The council is divided, Osvar said. Some believe this was a trick, a delay tactic, meant to buy the humans more time to prepare Kepler Station's defenses. Others believe, as I have come to believe, that you spoke the truth, that your people have reached a point where continuing this war serves no purpose except mutual destruction, and that they are prepared to make that destruction as costly as possible for both sides. Which do you believe now, Marshal? Osvar finally turned to face him. I have fought humans for 11 years, Captain. I have seen your species retreat when logic demanded it, and I have seen your species hold ground when logic said it was hopeless. Titan taught me that humans do not calculate the way we do. You do not measure a battle only by whether it can be won. Sometimes you measure it only by what you refuse to lose. He paused. I believe you, not because I want to, but because everything I have witnessed since boarding that empty ship has confirmed it. Cade felt something in his chest loosen slightly, a tension he had carried since before his stasis sleep even began. What happens now? The Council has authorized me to open a formal channel of negotiation with your Earth Alliance command, Osvar said. I make no promises about the outcome. There are those among the Dominion who will resist any peace that does not include complete human surrender, just as I suspect there are humans who will resist any peace that does not include complete Scarn withdrawal. But a channel is open now that did not exist 4 days ago, and that is more than either side had before your ship arrived. That's more than I hoped for when I went into that pod, Cade admitted. There is something else, Osvar said. Dr. Vesik's studies of your stasis technology and of your own physical enhancements have raised questions among our scientists that go beyond simple military curiosity. Your species built something that allowed a living being to survive undetected, suspended on the edge of death, for months, without harm. That is not merely a weapon, Captain. That is an achievement few species in this galaxy have managed. It has caused some among the Council to wonder what else humanity might be capable of building, given the chance to do so in peace rather than war. Cade allowed himself something close to a smile, tired but genuine. We tend to do our best work when we're desperate, Marshal. I'd like to think we could do even better with room to breathe. Osvar's mandibles clicked in a way that Cade had come to understand, through 3 days of careful observation, was the closest thing to a laugh his species expressed. Perhaps we shall find out together, Captain. I am arranging for a shuttle to return you to Earth Alliance space, under a flag of temporary truce. along with a formal request for negotiations to begin at a neutral location. Your government will decide whether to trust that request. I cannot promise they will. They'll listen, Cade said with quiet certainty. If nothing else, my return alive will tell them something changed here. That alone will get someone's attention. 2 weeks later, General Marcus Webb stood once again in his office on Freedom Point, looking at the same star map that had shown him nothing but red dots and desperation only a month before. Now, a new marker blinked steadily near the Kepler system, a small blue and purple symbol representing the first joint Earth Alliance and Skarn Dominion negotiation summit in the history of the war. Colonel Anna Reyes stood beside him, reading through the latest reports with an expression Webb had not seen on her face in years. Cautious hope. They're calling it the Kepler Accord, she said. Early terms only. Nothing final. But both sides have agreed to a ceasefire while formal negotiations continue. The Skarn Fleet Marshal who found the silent vow, Osvar, is leading their delegation personally. And Cade? Webb asked. Recovering, Reyes said. Physically, he's stronger than ever, if you can believe that. Vesic scans apparently confirmed everything our own doctors suspected about his enhancements. But there's something else. She hesitated. He asked to be part of the negotiation team, sir. Said if anyone understands what both sides have lost in this war, it's him. Webb considered this for a long moment before nodding. Approve it. If there's one person who's earned the right to sit at that table, it's Elias Cade. He looked out the window of his office toward the stars, toward the distant, unseen shape of Kepler system, where two exhausted species were, for the first time in 11 years, choosing to talk instead of fight. He thought of Project Silent Vow, of the desperate gamble it had represented, sending one sleeping soldier into the heart of an enemy fleet, with nothing but hope that curiosity would outweigh caution. It had worked, not because of overwhelming firepower or clever strategy, but because of something far simpler and far harder to calculate: the unwavering, stubborn refusal of one man to stop fighting for what mattered, even when the fight had changed from bullets and blades to words spoken quietly aboard an enemy ship. The war was not over. Peace, Webb knew from long experience, was never as simple or as fast as anyone hoped it would be. There would be setbacks, disagreements, perhaps even renewed fighting, before anything lasting could be built between two such different species. But for the first time in over a decade, there was a door open that had not existed before, and it had been opened not by an armada of warships, but by a single, empty-looking vessel, and the sleeping soldier, hidden deep within its hull. Somewhere in Kepler space, aboard a shuttle bearing both Earth Alliance and Skarn Dominion markings, Elias Cade looked out at the stars and allowed himself, for the first time since Titan, to imagine a future that did not require him to fight for it. Fleet Marshal Osvar, seated across from him in the shuttle's small conference cabin, studied the human captain with quiet curiosity. "Tell me, Captain," he said, "when this is finished, when the treaties are signed and the fighting has ended, what will you do?" Cade thought about the question for a long moment before answering. "I don't know," he admitted. "I spent so long thinking only about survival, about the next fight, the next threat, that I never let myself imagine anything past it. Maybe that's something I'll finally get the chance to figure out." "A strange thing," Osvar said, "for a species that fights so fiercely, to not know what it fights for beyond the fighting itself." "Maybe that's the real answer, Marshal," Cade said, watching the stars drift past the shuttle's viewport. "We fight so hard, because deep down, we're all hoping for exactly this. A chance to stop, and find out what comes next." The shuttle continued on toward Kepler Station, carrying two representatives of two very different worlds, toward a future neither could fully predict, but which both, for the first time in over a decade, dared to hope might finally include something other than war. Behind them, drifting quietly in the space near where it had first been discovered, the UNS Silent Vow remained exactly where Echo had left it, its mission complete, its message delivered, waiting patiently, as it always had, for whatever came next.